child, I was really interested in animal behavior. I was always, reading about Jane Goodall and primates in the wild and sort of thought that that's what I would be when I grew up. And in fact, in college was studying squirrels and studying birds and stuff like that. But I come from a family where public service is a really important value. And so putting together, like living in a tent, studying animals with how do you impact people was a tension for me. And I came to realize that psychiatry is the study of human behavior. And if you could understand what causes the alterations in behavior that we see in our psychiatric illnesses, maybe you could help people. And so that's the two pieces of me, the interest in behavior and then the interest in helping people that got me into the mental health field. Look, these careers are not easy. These careers have many, obstacles all along the way, whether you end up as a clinician or you end up as a researcher, as I did. And then you also have your home and family life. And so trying to balance all of this, I'm a mother and I had children along the way and the challenges of that. So there's that sort of larger picture of it. But what I would say probably as I think about my career and I reflect back on it, early on, I was often the only woman in a room or the only physician woman in a room or the only scientist in a room in some of the circles that I was in. And that's challenging. I think some of the environments I was in were incredibly supportive of me and didn't make a big deal about that. But some of the environments I was in were clearly communicating to me that I, as a woman, should not be there. And that only intensified when I had children. I, as a woman with small children, should not be in those rooms. And then I think, I don't know whether it's gender-based or not, but my style of leadership is also different than the typical style that was common at the time of being a male. And so what that can lead you to doubt yourself. And it can lead to your having to counteract bias in so many interactions sort of across the day, every day in so many ways. Yeah, I'm so much happier now than I was, let's say 20 years ago. I am no longer the only woman in the room, the only MD or, high-level professional. I'm not the only leader, female leader in the room. I mean, it's really different. Now, I'm not saying it's, some of the issues are gone, and I hear from younger women that some of the issues are still there, and there still is this sort of historical bias of, maybe only men can lead, and I think being a woman leader, you have different challenges about the expectations people have on you, both male and female expectations. And I think that as soon as you get a more diverse voices in a room, whether it's on gender, whether it's on age, whether it's on discipline, you actually create a more inclusive environment, and then it's easier for different styles to succeed. I'd say what are the leadership qualities any leader should have, right? So I think all leaders, and this is my opinion, I think the top one is integrity. I think if you don't have integrity, I think it's really hard to lead. I think vision. Now, that isn't necessarily, it's all about your vision. That's about how do you help to create a shared vision and then carry that flag. So it's really a shared vision. I think you need someone who's on the mission, who is serving the mission, not themselves, not their own ego. Obviously, you got to challenge the process as a leader. So you need to be interested in innovating and making things better. But you also have to be able to execute. And that means making hard decisions a lot of the time, really hard decisions, but it's in service of the mission. So that's what enables you to do it. And you don't do anything alone as a leader. It's very different than being, the head of a research group that you run and it's your vision for a research program, or the head of a clinical practice, let's say, and it's your practice. As a leader, big things only happen when you bring other people along. So that ability to create and lead a team that functions very well together is essential as well. I think that almost those questions, they're best answered by women around me sort of saying, have I helped them? But, what I would say, what I've tried to do you know, obviously we all we join professional societies. And so I've been on some of the women's committees of professional societies that I've been on to make sure that women have a seat at the table. And that can include things like, making sure that when there are awards, nominations for awards, if you see only male names come in, which is, this is a true story, you make sure that actually women understand that they need to nominate themselves, which is not necessarily what they think about, or they need to ask people to nominate them, which is, again, not necessarily what they think about, to make sure that there's a diverse pool at the very beginning. Likewise, if they're job searches, making sure that that there are diverse applicants to any role or any position that you're looking at. And you can play that role in your department. You can play that role on professional societies. I think that's really important. Just thinking about what would be other things I would say. I think the other thing that's really important is once you have power in the field, it's hard to do it when you're really junior. But as soon as you have any degree of power in the field, when you notice women voices are being shut down, or there's not sort of, if you will, equity or equality, whichever word you want to use, you need to speak up. And if you in a role of power don't notice and speak up, why will anyone else? And that has included, for example, noticing who gets editorial options to write in journals, or who actually is actually allowed to review papers. If you're on a journal and you're an editor and you're picking reviewers, what's the diversity of voices that are allowed to give opinions on those articles? I already mentioned the award thing. It's about taking your power and making sure that you're creating a ladder for the people behind you. That's really important. And then I think talking honestly with women about the challenges and sort of problem solving. I think that having a peer network is really, really important. Although I've had wonderful advice from male colleagues. So I actually was very fortunate early in my career when I started in a leadership role. Again, I was the only woman in the leadership executive committee, and I happened to be the head of it. But I found that my male colleagues were really eager and really good at advising me on things like, should I do this? And they could know yes or no. I should do it very, very quickly. So it's not only talking to women, but I do think that these are other ways. In a funny way to advance women is to be part of the whole system and to work with both men and women as you're moving up the ladder. I'm not a leader who likes to respond to the squeaky wheel. I actually think if you want an environment that's a level playing field, then you actually have to address inequities when you see them and not just wait for someone to actually advocate for themselves. So that's another way that doesn't necessarily have to only benefit women. That can benefit anyone who's hesitant to speak up. But I think if you have quality and expertise that you want to keep, you don't just sit around waiting for someone to knock on your door saying, would you give me something? I mean, what comes to my mind, I don't know if it's the only piece of advice, but I actually think, as I think back, I've been given wonderful advice along the way. And I actually would recommend a particular book, which is The Power of a Positive No. Particularly, I found that book, the book that those authors are best known for is Getting to Yes. I didn't find Getting to Yes a very helpful book at all, because I think in my generation, as women coming up the ladder, we were socialized to always say yes. And so then we would end up with way too much on our plate and didn't know how to say no. I actually found the subsequent book that one of the authors wrote, in a sense, how to deliver a positive note, way more useful. So I definitely recommend that book because it's about how to say no without hurting the relationship. And you're not saying no, to deny someone something. You're saying no because you are connected to something else and you're on that mission. So it just reframed saying no in a way that made it much easier for me to decide what did I want to say no to so that I could say yes to other things. So that's a book. But I would say the other piece of advice is to really own when you bump into resistance or challenges, it's not always about you. So I think that it's really important to reflect, oh, what's going on here? Is it, have I missed something? Am I not communicating this in the right way? There's all that sort of self-reflection about how could I do this better? But sometimes what you're bumping into isn't about you. It's actually about them. And it's because you're have a vision that's farther than they can see, and they're challenged by that. It's because you are innovating and advocating for change, and that threatens their power base. It can be their assumptions about you, particularly again as a woman leader, and there's a lot I could tell you about that. But if you take it out of the, oh, did I do something wrong? And just sort of reflect on what could I do better, but then also seeing really clearly what the other person is bringing to the interaction, I think it can really help you navigate some of those situations. There's such a long list. I hesitate from naming anybody for fear that I'm going to keep people off, but I immediately think of in college, the person I went to work with as a research assistant, and this is when I was studying squirrels in Yosemite National Park, Kay Holcamp. And I am in touch with her today. She's a great friend, but her excitement about science and then what she's accomplished in the field really inspired me. And then when I got into psychiatry, I've had, Ellen Liebenluft was the first MD female researcher who was married and who openly talked to me about the importance of her family and her kids. And that was incredibly valuable to me at that moment, because looking around, I didn't have many models of that particular prototype. Then in my department, I was wonderfully supported by Jean Endicott. I have incredible admiration for Myrna Weissman. I already mentioned, well, I didn't mention her name, Darcy Kelly, who was critical to me. So there are many, many people. But what I find now, which is interesting, I'm also inspired by the next generation. So I have a former student who's giving grand rounds today, Susanna Mari, and I learned a lot from her, even when I was her mentor. She was very skilled at navigating the basic science political environment. And I really learned a lot from her. And she's the one who said, no, you've got to apply for this because you're my mentor and I want you to rise because right? Do you see what I'm saying? It's like she just was very accomplished about that. Or right now, Sapana Patel, who I just love watching her grow and seeing what she's doing and navigating the political system. So I'm now inspired as well by a whole generation below me and how they're navigating the world. I am a very, look, ADA is really important to me. I got introduced to it by my mentor when I was a postdoc. And back then, Geraldine Ross, one of the founders, was the head, and I developed a relationship with Geraldine, and that was really exciting and interesting. And watching ADA change over the course of my career has been fascinating. So it's under the leadership of Geraldine Ross, and then I worked closely with Elise Muskin, and now I work closely with Susan Gurley. And watching the organization go from a sort of a small organization that was really Geraldine Ross's vision and wanting to help the public, but having the vision Geraldine had of connecting it to the science, to the organization that we have today, which is very professional and sort of grown up in a very different way, has been very exciting. And I think a lot of ADA members know the professional side of the organization, but I also know the public side. So what's unique to me about ADAA is it's got both missions. It is a professional society that brings together clinical researchers largely and clinicians together, which is not typical of most of our professional societies, and has a huge public face. And so millions of people go to the ADA website. The public goes to the ADA website every year. And when you think that a fifth of people will have a depression episode in their lifetime and almost a third will have an anxiety disorder, the public impact of ADA is and can be huge. So I think ADA is at a very interesting strategic moment where, having gone through in the past, all of these different transitions, and now in a very strong financial place, I really think it's in a place to really expand its impact, particularly in our world now, where people are much more willing to talk about mental health issues, and particularly where there's been a huge focus on anxiety and depression. So I really look forward to seeing what ADA does over the next 3 to 5 years. It's a great honor. And to have been connected to the organization since I was a postdoc, to know Geraldine, Elise, and Susan, and now to be as serving as president, it's a great honor. And I have met so many wonderful members who, I know many, many people who are members of ADA, but as president, you get to expand that circle hugely. And having that type of impact, being able to bring science and evidence to the public in the service of helping people with depression, anxiety, that's my passion. So how great to have a large role in a large organization to be able to have that large impact.